guys want to talk about. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk about animal love today, which, like I said, is one of my favorite topics to talk about, just because there's lots of cool different things, and there's some funny things that we're going to talk about today too. Before we get started, I know there are some littles on here with us. So this is kind of a different topic that we've had. So we are going to talk about animal love today. We're going to talk a lot about animal copulation, reproduction, and some of the ways that animals do this. And so this is extremely important when we talk about animal populations and how we get new animals and genetic diversity. So we're going to talk about that today. We will keep it professional, but we do want to let you know that we will be talking about some things that may be over some littles' heads, or might be some topics that are uncomfortable sometimes to talk about, but we will keep it fact-driven. Everything that I'll tell you today is going to be fact and science-based. So this is the Science of series, so we will get into things and how it works and why animals do this. So we'll talk a little bit about mating rituals and some copulation techniques, but it's all science-based. So just kind of like a little disclaimer here at the beginning, just to let you know what we are going to talk about today. So, all right, so we're going to get into it. We're going to talk a little bit about reproduction. So what is reproduction? This is very important when we talk about animals and maintaining a species population. So we don't get new animals if they don't copulate. We're not going to get more animals if they never do it. So this is how we're going to get more species and good genetic diversity. And with those genetic diversity, we're going to have things like mutations that give us adaptable animals and lots of different varieties of those animals. So the way that animals do it, it's a very complex process, and it varies between different animal families and different animals and different genres of animals. So we're going to talk about that today. So all species reproduce in one or two ways. When you break it down, there's two different ways that they can reproduce. It's going to be either sexual reproduction or asexual reproduction. So you might have remembered those or heard those terms before. So we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about those. So when we talk about asexual reproduction, what is that? It means that there's one parent without the fusion of a sperm or egg. So the female is usually the one that basically clones herself and creates an entire new population without the presence of males. There's some genre and some types of animals that do this a lot, and then there's some animals that never do this, and then there's some animals that actually can do both. So it's mostly limited to invertebrates. So when we talk about invertebrates, that means animals that do not have a backbone. So I have a picture of a starfish on here. So starfish do it. Lots of different invertebrates like insects do it. Flatworms will do it. So lots of different ways that they, lots of different types of animals that have asexual reproduction. But there's always exceptions when it comes to the biological world. For instance, like our mammals, they all give live birth except two of them. They live in Australia. We're not going to talk about that today. But what I'm saying is there's always an exception. There's never things that follow the rules exactly. So without males sometimes in a population, some species have been known to use asexual reproduction, like snakes and sharks. You might have even heard of some different snakes in zoos that have never even been exposed to a male, and then just one day they have babies. So without those males, life will find a way, to quote Jurassic Park, but I mean, that is how things work. If they need to mate and they need to pass on their genes, they're going to find a way to have babies, and they're going to find a way to reproduce without those males. So it does happen, but it's mostly limited to invertebrates. So when we talk about sexual reproduction, it's highly favored throughout the animal kingdom because it's a lot easier and it's not as energy, you don't have to use a lot more energy through this. It requires the sperm to fertilize an egg to create an offspring. So there is either physical contact, or sometimes things like water can carry the sperm or the sperm to the egg to get them to fuse together. So some species, like we talked about, can exhibit both sexual and asexual reproduction. For instance, snakes, we talked about that earlier. More than likely, they're going to do sexual reproduction. But again, if they don't have those males, then they will be forced to do asexual reproduction. I also want to talk to you something about, they're called hermaphrodites. So if you've never heard of this, it means that they can actually have both male and female parts. There's few animals out there in the animal kingdom, snails, land snails are one of them. We'll talk about those later today. They actually can switch sexes later on in their life. So if being a male is just not working for them, it's not a way for them to pass on their genes, they can actually switch sexes and become female later in life. And we will actually talk about one of the animals that is doing that and does that, not in Nebraska. We'll talk about some exotic animals that do it, but we will work on that later as we get through the presentation. All right, so when we talk about human dating, if you guys have ever been on a date or known someone that's been on a date, it can be very strange and it's awkward and there's a lot of different rules that you hear about. Should I wait 3 days to call them? Should I use an online dating site? Is he my boyfriend? Is he my girlfriend? The 90-day rule, the 48-hour rule. Talking about your exes, that's obviously never a good thing to do, but it happens. So when we talk about human dating, it's super awkward and it's super weird and there's all these rules that people have to follow. Well, when we look at animal dating, it's pretty much the same thing. It's awkward, it's weird, it's sometimes scary. So when we look at this, there's things that animals that give gifts. There's awkward copulation dances, there's noises, there's cannibalism. There's these things called love darts. Some penguins will actually give the females a pretty pebble, and if she likes the pebble, then she is allowed to mate and they are allowed to mate with each other. So animal dating is very strange to us, but I'm sure if this was the other way around, animals would think human dating is weird. So we'll go ahead and talk about some different reproductive behaviors. So when I mention these later on, you guys know what the heck I'm talking about. So for instance, monogamy. When we talk about an animal being monogamous, it means that they are a female and male paired bond. We usually sometimes call it social monogamy, which means that they mate, they raise their young together, they spend time together. They are usually a male and a female together when we talk about animals. So not always, but that does mostly happen. Sometimes there's a thing called serial monogamy, which just means that the mating system depends on the season. So one season they might have one mate, the next season they might have another mate. And this might sound strange to us as humans, but if you remember animals, their whole goal is to pass their genes on and to create offspring. So it might sound strange and weird for us, but for them, it's totally normal. So mostly mammals do not do this. Humans are one of the only mammals that actually have monogamous relationships. So it's about less than 5% of about the 5,000 different types of mammals will actually practice this. However, if you look at birds, 90% of all bird species in the world have social monogamous relationships. So they find one male and one female and they mate and they are paired bond until they die. When you're looking at birds versus mammals, it's totally different. So if we look at monogamy, it's usually favored over polygamy, which is just the opposite of it. And we'll talk about that here in a second. Because when there's environmental resources are limited, the maximum survival of young requires the care of both parents. So if you are two parents and you're bonded together like these owls, snowy owls are mostly known to do this as well, you're more likely to be able to care for your young if there's two parents. If there's one parent, there's a chance that those offspring are not going to make it. So it's mostly favored over having many different mates. But there is a type of mating system. It just depends on natural selection, whatever their habitat is, what kind of animal they are, how they've adapted and evolved over time is just kind of what that species just does. So when we talk about polygamy, the total opposite of monogamy, it's mating with multiple partners. So lots of insects do this. A lot of mammals do this as well. They're relatively stable and usually have two or more mates. Most of the time, it is the males that have multiple partners, but not always. Females can do it too. So when females have multiple partners, we call it polyandrous behavior. It's really rare in birds, but it does happen. And a large fraction of mammals are actually polygamous. So if you think about lions are a great example. If you've ever watched a group of lions or a pride of lions, is usually one male and many different females. So that male will usually mate with all of those females. They're usually in places that really have harsh environments. So like desert animals, really areas that are really cold, just because the chances of survival of those offspring are not very high. But if they mate with multiple females, odds are one of those offspring are probably going to survive. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about some mating rituals for Nebraska animals.
Monica, we had a real interesting question about monogamy.
Yeah.
And they were asking if this was talking about birds, but if a bird's mate dies and they're in a monogamous, I can't pronounce it correctly.
Monogamous.
Well, yep, there you go. Will they pair with another one, or will they just, you know, be a bachelor or bachelorette the rest of their life?
That's a really good question. A lot of birds will actually go find another mate, even though they have had that monogamous bond with someone. Again, their whole goal is to pass on their genes. So if one of their mate dies, they will more than likely go find another one. So it does happen. Yeah, I think there's very few that will not find a mate after that. That's a good question. All right, were there any others?
Nope, not yet. So if you've got questions, plop them in the chat, and when I can, we'll squeeze them in and let Monica answer them.
Awesome. Hopefully I can. All right. So now we'll talk a little bit about some mating rituals that happen in Nebraska. So these are all animals that have Nebraska roots when we talk about them. All right. So first one, if you've never heard of a prairie vole, not a mole, but a vole with a V, this is what they look like. They're extremely adorable, and these are ones that actually have a monogamous relationship. So these are like the 5% of all those mammals out there that actually mate and have a paired bond with each other. We would not usually think of rodents to be playful and affectionate towards each other, but they actually are. Studies have shown that these two animals, when they're stressed out, if one of the mates are stressed, they will give hugs and kisses to each other to make them not stressed. So very similar to humans. They spend about 50 to 60% of their entire life together, if not more. So they're very affectionate. They spend a lot of time together. And usually if another member of the colony or another random animal or a vole will come close to them, the couple will chase them away. This is their area. They are wanting to be together, and they don't want anyone else to disrupt that. One of the things that scientists have found, though, is that these guys can eat a lot of fruits. And if you know anything about fruits that tend to sit a while, they get fermented, and it makes kind of an alcohol-based solution. Well, those animals are going to eat that. And a lot of the times, if those animals get intoxicated from the alcohol solution that they're eating, what can happen is the males will tend to stray from each other, from their females, sorry. A lot of the times the females feel more bonded to their males, but the males will actually tend to stray away from each other if they are intoxicated. So it's just kind of an interesting scientific find, but otherwise they are a very good monogamous pair for each other. All right, so we're going to switch it up and talk about some spiders right now. If you've ever heard of a nursery web spider, we do have these in Nebraska. This is a picture of them over here. But these boys, they will, to get a female or to find a female or to get her to be attracted to him, what they will do is they will actually give them gifts of food. So I don't know about you guys, but I love it when my husband brings me food. I mean, who doesn't? So what they will do is the males will actually kill sometimes and eat sometimes a prey that they have caught in their web or have caught for a female, and they will wrap it up in a pretty silk little ball, and they will give that to the female. And if the female accepts this gift, she will let the male mate with her. However, sometimes males will lie about what they have given the female. Sometimes they're lazy and they really don't even kill another animal. They wrap up a stick because they're lazy and they just want to mate with a female. Or sometimes they get hungry and they will eat the gift that they're going to give to the female. Or sometimes they will even suck out the insides of it and leave the exoskeleton, or that hard portion, around the insect, and then give that to the female. So sometimes the females don't notice, but what they will do is once the males give her the gift, she will actually weigh it. And if she determines that it's an okay gift, she'll let the male mate with her. However, if she finds out that the male is lying about what he gave her, he clearly is not acceptable to mate with. So they will end the relationship and they will go their separate ways. All right, so talking about fish now, if you guys have heard of bluegills, they're a very common species that we have here in Nebraska. They're kind of a round little disc looking shaped fish. But what these guys will do is there's 3 different types of males when we talk about fish and when they're mating, and they're very territorial for their area. So we call them territorial males, sneaker males, and then we have female mimics. So these territorial males are going to be your big buff fish. These are ones that claim their territory and don't let anyone else come near them. And then we also have these things called sneaker males, which are a little smaller and they're sneaky. So what they will do is they will wait kind of on the outskirts while the dominant males or the territorial males are the ones that are able to come close to the females. And then there's a 3rd category called a female mimic. So these are the older males that are kind of past their prime to mate, however they still can. But what they will do is they will actually look like a female and have all these territorial males come up to him thinking he's a female, and then at the last minute he will dart over by a female and attempt to mate with her, so and fertilize her eggs, sorry. And so we have different categories of these fish, but they all are trying to mate with this female. And so again, it's kind of like a hierarchy system. You have the big dominant males, you have the smaller males, and then you have the really small males. So all of them are trying to mate with the female. It's just different ways that they have about doing it. They're kind of sneaky sometimes. All right, one of my favorite animals to talk about is snakes. So if you guys have ever heard of a garter snake, or what we call a mating ball sometimes, this happens quite a bit in the springtime. So when males try to mate with females, it is very competitive. So females will usually be swamped by multiple males that kind of twist and form what is called a mating ball around her. There's a place in Canada every year that thousands of garter snakes come together and try to mate with 5 or 6 females. So it's just this huge bunch of garter snakes. So what the female will do is that she will release a pheromone or a smell that lets the males know that she's ready to mate. And the males will come to her. However, there are some sneaky males out there that will emit another smell very similar to a female smell, and so all the males are sometimes tricked and they will go towards the male that emits the smell and leave the female alone. And then once they go over there, that little sneaky male will sneak back into the mating ball and try to mate with the female. So again, animals can be sneaky, but if you think about it, there's some sneaky people out there too. So very similar to how some people date and mate, and it just kind of happens. So all right, one of the coolest birds that we have in Nebraska is called the greater prairie chicken. These guys, if you've ever watched them, they're very, very cool to watch. And I actually have a poll. So if you guys have ever seen prairie chickens, what we call booming or mating within Nebraska, if you want to fill this out, either yes, no, or I wish I have seen them. They're very interesting to watch if you ever get a chance in the springtime, usually March and April. Out in western Nebraska. I would highly recommend this if you're able to go. Looks like most people have, a lot of people wish they have. Some people know. All right, cool. All right, so these male birds, which you see in this picture here, have these really cool orange sacs that are next to their kind of their cheek area or their neck area. And what will happen is the males will form a lek area, which is where they gather and display themselves for the female. This is going to be a very open space that has very little tall vegetation or tall plants so that the females can see them. And these are like the hotbeds for social activity. This is where the males will spar with each other. This is where the males will dance for the females. This is where the females will come to decide which male she likes. So what will happen is a bunch of dominant males will kind of sit in the middle area here, and then all the lesser males will kind of be out on the perimeter area. And what will happen is that the males will boom. They will make a kind of loud drumming noise to get the females interested. If this doesn't quite do it, what they will do is they will puff up those air sacs on the sides of their head, and they can deflate them and inflate them as they call. And then they have these little, they look like ears, but they're called pinnae. And what they can do is they can move those around, they will stretch, they'll bounce up and down, they'll sing, they'll dance for the female, trying to get her to get interested in him. They will sidestep, and then a lot of the times the dominant males right there in the middle, they'll fight with each other. They think that, you know, this is their territory. They want to show the male or the female how cool they are or how tough they are. So they will actually use their talons. They're very small little spurs, kind of like on a pheasant, to fight with each other. Well, when the female decides that she wants to pick a mate, she will kind of walk through the middle and like kind of look around like window shopping and kind of just like look around, see if she sees anything she likes. If she doesn't see anything, she'll just leave. If she sees a mate that she really wants, usually what will happen is that couple males will mate with about 90% of the females. So this is, again, another bird that does not have a monogamous relationship. This is total polygamy behavior. There's many males or a couple males that mate with many females. So again, just to provide their offspring and more chances of survival. Now, something that's happened with these guys is that a couple males and this polygamy behavior sounds okay, but what's happening is that they're losing their genetic diversity. So just a couple males mating with all these females, they have very similar genes. And so it's lessening the amount of genetics that are out there. So it's creating a problem for our greater prairie chickens. But again, this is just their way of life, and this is how they've been doing it for as long as they've been around. So it's just something that conservationists are trying to move different males to different states so that we can create more genetic diversity. So it's kind of interesting, and I highly recommend going to watch them if you ever get a chance. The sounds are just super cool to listen to. All right, so porcupines, a lot of people don't even know that we have porcupines in Nebraska, but we do. So what the females will do is when they mate, they have to mate very carefully. If you know porcupines, they have over 30,000 quills on their body. And so they're also very solitary. You like never ever see female or porcupines together. They're kind of just loner animals. So the biggest problem with female or with porcupine mating is that they're so far away from each other, and they are only receptive for about 8 to 12 hours. So they can only mate with those 8 to 12 hour time. So what the female will do is she will release a pheromone, or this musk that we call it, and it will make all the boys come to her. So the males will be drawn to her, and then usually they will brawl for dominance. So once they find each other, if they decide that they want to be a mated pair, they will start with their nose rubbings. They're cute, they're affectionate. And then if the female accepts the male, he will actually urinate all over her. It sounds absolutely disgusting, but that's just how the female accepts the male. So if it's up to her standards, she will allow the male to mate with her. And again, they're only receptive for about 12 hours. So if they don't do it within their time, they have lost their chance to mate. All right. A lot of people know about this one, so we'll go quickly on them. But praying mantises are known, the females are known to cannibalize their mates or eat them afterwards. But it happens less than people think, actually. So what will happen is only about 13 to 28% of the time, the males will get eaten by the females. It's more common when you have captive bred mantises than non-captive bred or wild ones. So the female will lure in the males with her pheromones, or this special smell that she releases, and she will engage in a courtship dance. So if the male is deemed worthy, he will go ahead and mount the female and start fertilization. However, female Chinese mantids that do eat the male, they have more protein and more amino acids to create better and more eggs. So they say that the reason sometimes that praying mantises will eat the male is because they need that extra protein and amino acids to lay twice the amount of eggs than those ones that do not cannibalize. So again, they have a better chance of passing on their genes if you have more eggs than your competitor. All right, so bees are also ones that are going to have polygamy behavior. They mate with multiple mates. So bumblebees, they are very non-aggressive animals, but when they mate, they're very aggressive. They will actually knock a queen to the ground just to show his dominance, and then he will mate with her. Carpenter bees begin with a bobbing dance, sometimes called a waggle dance, which is kind of funny. There's usually 12 males and 3 or 4 females, and they will all mate in the air. So they never touch down when they mate. They have to do it in the air. Honeybees will also mate within the air, and they mate one at a time. The males, or the drones, will mate with the queen one at a time. So the drone's appendage, the male genitalia, is actually called the endophallus, which is tucked in and inverted into the body. So when the male mates with the female, or the queen, what will happen is he will mate, and then when he goes to leave, his endophallus will actually get stuck in the female and it will rip out of his body. There's no way that they can survive that. So what will happen is within a few minutes, the male will actually die. His whole goal, though, is to mate with the female and pass on his genes. So then when another male comes to mate with the queen, he will actually take the old endophallus out, throw it on the ground, and then mate with her. And then the same process will happen. When he goes to leave, half of his body is ripped out, and then the next male comes and he will take it out and mate with her again. So it's just kind of a cycle, but that's the whole point of a drone bee, is to mate with the female, or mate with the queen. All right, turtles. Depends on what kind of turtles you're talking about, but these guys can actually be very scary and rough if you think about it. So what will happen is when turtles find each other, they're very, very solitary animals most of the time, but when they do find each other, they will usually mate. It's divided into 3 phases. The male will usually circle. He'll shove the female. He's very aggressive. Usually reptiles are just very aggressive when they mate. She'll kind of retract into her shell. She's not really sure if she wants to mate, and the male will usually roll her over. The male will then mount the female, and if you've ever looked at a male box turtle, for instance, he has very long curved claws in the back. That is so that he can hold on to the female. That is the whole reason that those claws have evolutionarily adapted over time to looking like that. And then the male will actually mount the female, and then he has to go vertical to be able to release his sperm. So if you've ever seen turtles stand straight up and down when they're mating, that is why, because his sperm will not release unless he is at a vertical angle. All right, so bed bugs. No one likes bed bugs. So these violent mating behaviors will not make people like them anymore. But what male bed bugs will do is they have a very sharp needle-like genital area. And what they will do is they will actually stab the female and inseminate her directly into the body cavity. So males are not really known for their brains. So what they will do is when they attempt to mate with a female, they don't really know who's male, who's female. They just start kind of stabbing around. And a lot of the times males will stab another male and it will kill him. So females have developed a large bunch of cells, kind of like a callus on your hands or on your feet, that kind of protect her a little bit more. And so what will happen is when males go to stab her, she can protect herself from that. Males do not have that, so they will die. The bedbug sperm that is inseminated into her is antimicrobial, so it's germ-free, and it eliminates all those pathogens that are introduced to the female during sex. So it's clean when it goes in, and that's another reason why females do not die afterwards. All right, I'm sure a lot of you guys know about lightning bugs or fireflies, whatever you want to call them. But there are special flickers for each different type of species. So each species has a special flicker code that will attract mates of the same species. However, there is one female species of firefly that has been known to imitate a male, imitate different species, code flashes to get a male to come to her. So when that happens, if that gullible male comes up to her, she will actually grab him and eat him. A lot of people think that it is the sperm inside of him that triggers her desire to eat him, I guess. And so what will happen is that when males come up, they grab her, she grabs him and eat him, but it's only one type of firefly. Otherwise that doesn't happen. They're usually pretty non-aggressive as a species. So. All right, so earlier we talked about something called a hermaphrodite. So this just means that they have male and female parts. This is things like a snail. So if you've ever been to a place where you've seen a land snail, that's a lot of these animals. So these guys will actually find each other through touch, through smell, and they will release a special pheromone or that special smell that lets them know that they are ready to mate. So being hermaphrodites, they have both male and female parts. So they will touch each other with their tentacles. They'll kind of move circles very slowly around each other. And then several of the hermaphroditic snails, they have these what we call love darts. They're little calcium kind of, they look like calcium splinters. And so they will actually fire them at the other snail. And that ensures that they are able to develop their genes and pass on their sperm to that other snail. So they will do it to each other. The only thing they found is that the animals that actually do that or fire those love darts, it can reduce their lifespan. So they don't have a very long lifespan to begin with, but it can reduce it even more if they fire those love darts at each other. All right, this one I just learned about today and I had no idea. If you've ever known what a water strider is, it's those animals, the insects that are on the water that look like they're walking on the water. They have very, very long legs that help with surface tension and moving around. But what these guys will do is that they will threaten the female. So if they really want to mate with this female and the female is like, no, I don't want to, they will threaten her by calling in a predator. So what the male will do is he will tap the water, which will lure in predatory fish to come and eat him. So he will basically keep doing that until the female gives in. And then what he will do is the female will be on the bottom and the male will be on top. So what happens is they are prey sitting there. They're sitting ducks sitting there waiting for a fish to come up and scoop them out of the water and eat them. So it has to be very quickly. So the whole goal is to get the female to quickly do this so that she's less likely to be eaten by a predator. So however, it has to be consensual. There's a special what's called a genital shield on the female that only lets the male copulate with her if it is consensual. So he has to make her be her idea, otherwise she could get eaten. So insects are kind of aggressive when it comes to mating and courtship, but again, it's all about them passing on their genes to each other, and that's how there's more of those species. All
Monica,
right.
we had a question about the love dart from the
All
snail.
right.
And we are wanting to know, does that contain the sperm, or is that used for something else?
So that contains the sperm. So both males and females have, they both have male and female parts. So that is the sperm going into there, and that will fertilize the egg inside of them. So they can shoot them at each other. Does that make sense?
Right. And whoever loses is the girl that has to carry the young. So
yeah,
you have to be a good shot. Otherwise, you're stuck being the girl and the other person's the dude.
Yes, yes. All right, we will actually, there's a couple that I wanted just to talk to you guys about. All right, so mountain lions are super interesting. These guys, if you ever heard of Tinder, this is kind of like mountain lion Tinder. So what will happen is mountain lions, when they move around, they tend to woo or attract the females by using these shared community scrapes. So they build up this kind of pile of dirt and leaves and sticks, and then the male will actually defecate and urinate on it. And if the female comes by, she can decide, wow, this male smells really good, I would like to mate with him. And so she will attempt to go find him. So it's kind of like mountain lion Tinder. They kind of make the scrapes, and then the female will decide yes or no. So it's kind of an interesting thing for big mammals to do that. All right, so I'm gonna talk quickly about some cool things that we don't have in Nebraska, but I just wanted to bring them up just to show a huge diversity. If you've ever heard of an anglerfish, these guys, the males, it's better to be a female in this case, because the male will actually bite the female, and then he will hang on as a parasite to the female, and the female will actually absorb his body until all that's left are the gonads, and then the female will use those when she is ready to reproduce. So if you're a boy, your only job is to cling on to a female and get absorbed by her. So it's kind of different. Fish are really weird, especially this anglerfish here. If you ever heard of a spotted hyena, these guys have a really bad reputation for being mean, aggressive animals, and sometimes they are. However, if you've ever heard of the story of Noah's Ark and all the two animals, a lot of times people did not include hyenas in that story because they believed that they were hermaphrodites. They had male and female parts. That's not true. People just learned about this even like 40 years ago. So it's a very new concept. Hyenas are very aggressive. And when a female will have a baby, if she's a dominant female within that pack animal, she will release this extra hormone surge, which will make more aggressive females. So if you think about it, if you're a scavenger, if you're an animal that needs to hunt and kill for food, the more aggressive you are, the more food you eat, and the better chance you have at surviving. So for animals to have an aggressive activity, that aggressive behavior, hyenas really want that. So it's a little different for hyenas, but they get a really bad reputation, but they're carnivores that do good and have good things happen to them. So, all right, clownfish. These are one of these guys that all clownfish ever born start out male. And then what they will do is they will fight to go up higher on the dominance ladder. And when you make it to the very top, you will transition into a female and then actually mate with the second highest male. So they alone are allowed to mate. That's it. So when they don't make it that high, they just don't get a mate, and eventually they will just die. So their whole goal in life is to become the highest ranking male so that they can transition to a female so they can mate with the other male. All right, bowerbirds. These guys will decorate these really cool little wreath areas to woo a female. They'll put lots of pretty things in there, man-made objects, bones, pieces of glass, whatever they can find to decorate their area. Well, what they will do is when the female comes up, they will arrange the objects farther away, making them look bigger. So when she looks at them, she's like, wow, the male is really big. He would be good for my genes. I want him to protect me. There's lots of different reasons that she wants a larger male. Better chance of making offspring and making better offspring. So bowerbirds are kind of an illusionist when they make themselves look bigger than they really are. All right, I think that's it. Next week, like I said, is my last one for this series. We'll talk about animal myths. So a lot of different myths and exaggerations that come with animals, but we will go ahead and talk about them. And then, like I said earlier, we're going to do another installment of the Science Of series. Here are the topics that we're going to do. Invasive species, diseases, snakes, plants. I heard a lot of people say they're interested in talking about plants and endangered species. Towards Halloween, we'll get to the spooky or scary animals. But otherwise, yeah, that's it. Thank you. And remember to join us next week for animal myths. So are there any questions or anything in the chat?
So we're having some people say they love the fish example. That was a little weird and strange, but very interesting. And people are saying it was very informative.
Good. I hope I made it professional. There's a lot of ways that this could not be professional, but I was fact-driven and science-based. So I hope everyone learned something and it was appropriate for all the children and people that were watching. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we can get that answered for you.
All right. Well, thanks for hosting, Amanda, co-hosting.
Somebody had a question about whether you could share the slides as a note or...
Yeah, Connie, I will put my email in here, and then what I can do is I can make them as a PDF, if that works, and then send them to you since they're a little large for me just to send them over an email. But yeah, if you want to email me and just say what you would like, and I can certainly send those over. Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and let you all go. I don't think we have any more questions, but if you do, you can always email me. I hope you guys had a great time, and we'll see you next week at 3 p.m. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica.
Thanks.